Okay, here we go. So I'm starting out with the same theme as I had last time because I know a lot of you people are landscapers. And so I've expanded a little bit on mushrooms that you will see in the landscaping. And let me just start out here. Were you guys out looking for mushrooms this past week? It rained like crazy in Hilo, and I think on most of the other islands it rained too. And these are things that came out in my garden right at the university. This is the wonderful Lepista nuda, the bluet. This is a really great edible, and it's nice and lavender that you're not going to mistake it with anything else. There's no other mushroom that kind of looks like this. And I have huge fairy rings and arcs of these fruiting bodies in the garden this week. And in my greenhouse, you guys probably know about this, the nursery pot parasol, this bright yellow mushroom. It was coming out of the bottom of my pots and it was coming out the top of the pots. It's a saprotrophic thing, so it's not hurting your plants at all. And, I always tell the story that KTA called me up once and had me come and look at some potting material that had just come in. And it was just yellow with these fruiting bodies inside. They love peat. They grow on peat. You can grow them on straight peat like that. They're slightly toxic and stuff, but they were up like crazy. And I bought myself a new bag of potting material, and I bought it because it was cheap. And I made about 20 or 30 pots of this, and this mushroom came up in every single pot. So it shows you how mushrooms get to Hawaii. They're shipped in with all kinds of potting material and that. Whoops, let me go back. And this is in my garden again. I had a one board there, and these netted stinkhorns are coming up under the board. Very beautiful things to look at. And where I haul the trash, these are called creeping crumble caps, Coprinus disseminatus. They were fruiting all over the logs. You've probably seen them. And this too, Lentinus bertieri, grows on rotting stumps and stuff like that. These are all in my garden. And the reason I saw them is because I'm always looking down. Remember, when you're hunting mushrooms, you have to look down and run into trees and stuff like that, but that's where they are. In the compost piles, the agaricus, this is Agaricus rotalis, was coming up everywhere. I don't know how many emails I had from people that said, what is this thing? I've never seen anything like it. Well, you aren't looking very hard because this thing is all over the place in mulch and in wood piles. So let me just refresh your memory again about how to identify a mushroom. You always would want to look on the stalk or the stipe there in the middle, if it has a ring or not, or an annulus around it, because either it doesn't have one at all, or it has one, it looks like a ring on your finger and it'll slip up and down the stipe like that, or it looks like a lady's skirt like this one that's shown here, because that really gets us started off of what the mushroom is. You want to look at the base of it, you see there, that's called a vulva. The very deadly Amanitas come out of vulva like that. So you always want to dig the mushroom out of the dirt, out of the ground to see what it is. And I'll show you more. This is what we do, when we're out in the field. We just really collect until noon because it's cooler and more moist in the morning. That's when the mushrooms are out. But in the afternoon, you're sitting there writing up these mushrooms, drawing what they look like, what are the dimensions, what are the colors and stuff like that. Now, this represents here, this little black dot is a fungal spore. One mushroom will easily drop 1 million spores a day. And so you have 1 million of these growing, and you can see the hyphae, the little tubes growing out of this and the branching like this. And this grows into what's called a mycelium. So this is my doormat. I think you've seen this before in front of my house. This is a mycelium here, threads, and they're all organizing together to make these mushrooms. It's hard to believe when you're eating a mushroom, you're eating these little threads. There's millions of these little threads, and how they differentiate into these beautiful things we call mushrooms and different kinds of fruiting bodies like that. Now, when we collect mushrooms, you'd like to, you don't always get this lucky of finding a group of mushrooms. So you can see what the little ones look like and when they're mature, what they look like, because they can change color and change shape. So you'd like to have a group to study. And you always want to look underneath to see what the gills look like, what color they are, how they are attached to the stipe here is very important. And these are things we look for. Because mushrooms can have different kinds of gills and in this case, teeth here or pores. So many of the people who email me and ask me what the mushroom is, they just show me the top of it. And you just see a brown circle, you know, and you really need to have a shot underneath, and that would really help identify it. So here you have a sarcodon, a tooth fungus, which is found here in Hawaii. And here's a polypore, like a boletes and so on, and different types of gills. But the first question we always ask is, what color are the spores? And you can generally tell that from looking at the gills. So here in this Entoloma, you see they are pink. This is a very pink spored mushroom. Here you have white spores. Over here, you know, there are many colors of brown. So this is very rusty brown color. And here's a chocolate brown of an agaricus. So what I do is I take the mushrooms, and you see like this, you take the cap, you can put it on a piece of paper and let it sit. But I put them on, I have Petri dishes with glass slides. So I can drop those millions of spores on there and really see what the color is. And so as a mushroom identifier and as a mycologist, this one has black spores. So that I would right away, you know, look at Coprinus and maybe something that's growing in a cow pie or something like that. You can really narrow it down. This here's green spores. That would definitely be chlorophyllum. That's the only one that has green spores. So the color of the spores is often the first question in and looking these up. And you can't just say it's brown or it's yellow or something like that. We have a handbook of color. And so we put down it's whoops. Wait, I gotta go back. It's E12-7 or something. So we match the mushroom up with these colors so we can be very precise in what the colors are. So it's something you use. So now we're starting with the landscaping. Here's mushrooms and other fleshy fungi in composted wood chips and mulches. This is in Hawaii where I head for the composted wood chip heaps. I'm always watching them because there's all kinds of mushrooms, a Lepiota and a Coprinus that love this. For example, here's Coprinus curtis. You see it grows in great big clusters. Here it is in a really far out place called Liliuokalani Park in Hilo, Hawaii. And all the people are walking by these and I'm screaming and yelling, can't you see all these mushrooms here? This is really exciting stuff. But this is what you're going to see when you put out new mulch. I saw a lot of these this week growing in compost on the side. And here's all these different kinds of Coprinus, or they're called inky caps. As you can see in this lower hand right one, it's starting to deliquesce or just melt into ink, you know, into black ink, and that's where the spores are. These generally aren't poisonous to anybody, but they break down material in the compost. Now here's an important one and very common in Hawaii. This is Volvariella, or the paddy straw mushroom. So if you've eaten at a Thai restaurant or a Chinese restaurant and you have these little slivers of mushroom in your soup, that's what it is, paddy straw. Because in these countries, in the Philippines and China, they pile up the rice straw under little huts at the sides of the rice paddies, and then these mushrooms appear. So composted wood chips or anything like that in Hawaii, on all the islands, I've seen these. This very common on the Big Island and Oahu like this. This is the paddy straw mushroom. And you see this little black primordia, that's what they harvest. And you slice that up so that just fits in your soup. I've tried these big mature ones, but they don't taste very good to me. It's the little ones that are great. And this is again the nursery pot parasol, Leucocoprinus birnbaumii, and they're just spectacular. So they don't grow just in pots, they grow in compost all over the place. These are known to be toxic to pets. I don't know, you guys don't feed your pets, and so cats would eat them, or maybe a dog, and they would probably vomit. They wouldn't die, but they would be a little bit toxic to them. And here again with these lepiotas or parasol mushrooms, and you can see as mycologists, we always look for bruising. You know, that in this case with Besseyi, it bruises pink gills as soon as you touch them. And that's very, very identifying. This is a brand new one. My graduate student just published a paper on this, founded here in Hilo and now all over the island, has these kind of greenish yellow luminescent gills to it. Another type of lepiota, just a saprophyte. It grows in composting wood chips. And so if you see these, you'll see these big clusters of lepiota in compost piles. All them. Now, here's another group of mushrooms you find in compost are the agaricus, just like those that you get in the grocery store. This one is, my graduate student named this one Rotalis. You can see it always breaks the cap, the cuticle breaks up into this kind of rotary pattern like this. They have chocolate brown spores, pink at first and then chocolate brown. And then here's another one. This is all over Kona on the Big Island. And you can easily tell it. People call me up or email and say, what is this? They describe it. And I says, how does it smell? And they says, it smells awful. It's just the most rank smell you've ever, you would certainly identify it. Just smells terrible. In contrast, this agaricus is one you want to collect. This is the almond agaricus, the almond agaric. Smells like almond extract. It tastes like almond extract. And friends of mine, they cut it up and they put it in pasta, and it's just a wonderful one to eat. Yeah, it's this kind of, it's called subrufescens. It's kind of have this rufous or reddish top to it. If you find any of those, you have to come to me and ask me what it is, and we'll split it, okay? Split them out. Also in compost, have you guys seen the bird's nest fungi? They're out by the thousands now. You got to be like me. I'm down on my hands and knees in the botanical garden, pulling weeds, and all these little bird's nest fungi are all over the place. And just of interest, there's a guy named Brody who studied these little types of fungi, and he stayed over at Kealakekua Bay on the Kona side, and he described 12 species of these from the Kealakekua Bay area. And the spores are inside these little packages. And when the rain hits them, it bounces them out, they go flying out, and that's how they spread around. And you will see them by the thousands in wood chips like that. They're there. So then you have mushrooms that, you know, you see more often probably in lawns. They also grow in compost and stuff like that. And this is the most common one. This is Konosabe. Have you seen these cone heads? I was out golfing and I counted about, what was it, 37,000 of them or something. They were just all over the fairways. And very common, it's not poisonous, and probably you wouldn't want to eat it either. But this is one you got to look out for. This is the Chlorophyllum molybdes. Chlorophyllum, chloro means green, of course. And you see this have green gills and green spores. This is the one that sends most people in Hawaii to the hospital. So I'm on call for all mushroom poisonings in the state. And before cell phones and cell cameras, you had to describe things over the phone. And people are notoriously terrible at describing what mushrooms look like. And I would say, well, it's a big mushroom. Well, who knows what a big mushroom is? And they're white, but they have cornflakes or something like Wheaties or cornflakes on the top. And no, it doesn't look like that. So I rush up the emergency ward, and this is what you see. I say, can't you see the brown cornflakes on the top or something like that? You see the green gills? They'll drop a very green spore print. Very common in the subtropics. They're common in Florida and all through the South and here in Hawaii. These will not kill you, but they will send you to the emergency ward. When you eat these, you know you're not going to write it out. You are so sick, you are vomiting, and that's not pretty. And you'll vomit for about 24 hours. Even though there's nothing more to come up, you know, you get the dry heaves, which isn't pretty. You have diarrhea beyond belief. You have rash over your body. You have stomach cramps, so you're in a fetal position. I know, I have visited a whole bunch of people in the hospital, even my former students who weren't listening that day. that ended up in the hospital. But nobody dies from this, and the symptoms go away in about a day. But don't eat this one. There is a mushroom like this on the mainland called Lepidoptera that looks a lot like this. So a lot of the people are visitors who say, oh, we eat this in Michigan. No, you don't. This is a different species. This is a different mushroom, and it has gastrointestinal compounds in it. Here they are, Naalehu school ground, they're growing on the lawns there. Now we'll switch. Here's the good edible one again. This is the one that was in my garden this week. This is Lepista tarda. There's one in California called Lepista nuda, which is also lavender violet like this, and it's a much bigger and thicker mushroom. Both of them are quite edible, easy to cultivate. I have one of my students on Maui, and she's cultivating them like crazy, and she showed me all those that she's growing. So here we are again down near the south point between Pahala and Naalehu. You see the fairy rings? These Lepista nuda grow in arcs or fairy rings, and they make the grass green like that. So I'm going down the road about 50 miles an hour. You can spot these big fairy rings out there. And if you look closely, there they are. They're coming up. And this is when you want to harvest them, when they're real purple lavender like this and quite small. So here's a couple of my colleagues that they came out and they're picking them for dinner. And here they really come up at Imiloa here in Hilo, in the lawns there. And you see there again, it's growing in an arc or in big fairy rings like that. So that's Lepista tarda, the bluet. That's a corruption I told you before. In the British Isles, they call this the blue hat. And the Americans didn't understand their English. So they said, what is it? It's the blue hat, the blue hat, the blue hat, the blue hat, the bluet. So now we call it B-L-E-W-I-T, the bluet, which is a corruption of blue hat. Now, here's a new arrival. I just wrote a paper about these mushrooms coming. I first found them on Kauai before they were even named. There wasn't a name for them. The first time I went to the meetings, and there was a poster where they were naming this macro, macro big, macrocybie, because these are really big. This is taken on Oahu. So it went from Kauai to Oahu, and then it went to Maui, and then it went to the Big Island. It's all over the Big Island right now. You don't miss these. These can get, the caps can get a foot across very easily. Look at these things in these huge clusters. You can't miss them. And of course, everybody wants to eat them, right? So I have to say, I don't know if they're edible. It's a newly described species. And so there is a very similar mushroom in Japan that they give 4 stars for edibility. And they say it smells like fish. So I smelled the dry ones. They smell like sardines or something like that. So I guess that's right. But I think it's a different thing. So I always want to be careful. Well, these guys on Kauai said, you're just too careful. We eat these and they're just delicious. We just love them. So they started selling them in the farmer's market in Lihue. And then I got the call from the emergency ward. We have all these people that are throwing up all over our guest room here and stuff, and they had eaten this mushroom. So I would say I wouldn't bother with this one. But here they are in the Big Island. Look at these. They're just showing up everywhere. You wouldn't believe how many. I probably get 20 emails a week, a month of them, people spotting them and going, what in the world is this? And puffballs. We do have puffballs here. I'll show you some more later on, but these are real common. I'm sure you've seen them in lawns and stuff like that. So these are things that we have on lawns. Now, people said, you got to come up and tell us what's growing on our lawn. They're cylindrical and tall and silver. And I go, I have no idea what that is. But I go up there and there are these black mounds on their lawn. And sure enough, here is a stinkhorn. And you know why they're called stink horns? They smell terrible. And this is Arachnoidea, which is the spider stinkhorn. And this black stuff in the middle is called the gleba, and that's where the spores are. And it tracks flies. Those black mounds over them were flies. I had to chase the flies away to get a photo of these things. And now they're spreading all over where I live in Upper Hilo. And I got the first report of them on Oahu. So somehow they got over there too. So this is it. These are cousins to Aceroi rubra, which is the red starfish stinkhorn like this. These are also common. Was taken at Honoka'a in wood chips up there. Also smells to high heaven. And then finally, on your lawns, you can have the netted stinkhorns like the ones I saw this week. This is Phallus cinnabarina. This color here, I had to look up, what color is cinnabar? Cinnabar is pinkish orange, which this really is, this pinkish orange. You'll see that a lot of times. Here's the gleba. That's the stinky stuff. That's attracting insects, especially flies. And the spores are in there, and that's how it gets transported around. Last week, I had 10 people email in with all these cinnabarinas growing in their placing. They want to know how to get rid of them. And the problem is, it's difficult. You see, here they are. Do you see how the pinkish orange this is? This is cinnabarina. And so what do people do? They want to get rid of them, so they take them to green waste. And they throw them in the green waste. And then what do people do? They go to green waste and pick up for mulch for their gardens. And so now we have them all over, including in pots in the nurseries in downtown Hilo. So I threw away this plant and kept these nice stinkhorns here. We also have this one, which has a yellow net. The net is called an indusium. This is multicolor. And we also have this third species of netted stinkhorn, which has a white indusium like this, Atrovalvedus. These have only been found on the Big Island. I have no reports. I ask everybody, all my colleagues on the other islands, if they've ever seen these, and they've never seen them over there. But probably they'll make their way over there eventually. You might know why they're called phallus. They're very phallic looking. And here, the last of my landscaping talk last time was the one you really want to know about. This is Amanita marmorata. It's deadly poisonous. Did you hear that? Deadly poisonous. If you ate this one, that would be fatal to a full-grown adult. It would certainly be fatal to a German police dog or something like that, of which I've had about 12 cases where dogs have eaten these and all died in a couple of days. It contains chemicals that will destroy your liver. And we have livers that take the toxins out of our blood. And without that, you only last a couple of days. This is an import from Australia, and it's only found under Australian trees. That includes all eucalyptus and what we call ironwood or casuarina in Hawaii. Any kind of paper barks, melaleucas and stuff that are used in landscaping. So I have, my kids are we're in Boy Scouts. Every Boy Scout camp is in a eucalyptus forest. And I always worried about some of the Boy Scouts trying one of these. And here again, you see, it has white gills, white spores. It has an annulus like a lady's skirt, you see, hanging down. And the big thing is they have vulvas. They come out of like egg-like structures out of the ground. So this is what you want to look for in these. So don't mess around and take a chance. These are fatal. I'd sent off to Michigan State to be analyzed, the toxins, and they said it's one of the most poisonous mushrooms they've ever seen. It's an import into Hawaii from Australia under Australian trees. It's mycorrhizal or associated with the roots of these. And when I was at the National Tropical Botanical Garden in Lauai, Kauai, they have a hillside where it's nothing but Australian trees. And it was white with these amanitas coming up in their roots from there. So this is our one deadly amanita that we have in Hawaii. Now, you all know that mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungi. The body of the fungus is in the substrate, in the grass, in the ground, in the log, or wherever. And these are like the apples on an apple tree. That's the way people compare it. And I just wanted to show you some of the other fruiting bodies that we have in Hawaii that aren't mushrooms. They're puffballs. This is Lycoperdon perlatum, the gemmed puffball. It's found, you know, in the native forest. It's one of the few alien fungi that's found in our native forest, and it's found totally in pig wallows and in pig trails. I've seen big clusters of these in these places because, you know, the spores get into pigs' hide and then they transfer it into these places. So they grow in these beautiful clusters like this. We do have the giant puffballs, especially here on the Big Island up in Parker Ranch, growing in the ranchers see them. These are the size of basketballs or larger. In Europe, they're very edible. When I was in Germany last time, you know, all the markets have these when they're young and white inside, they slice them up and I suppose you put them in butter and fry them up like pancakes, and they're really sought after. On the higher slopes of the mountains, we have stalked puffballs. And you see this one is Batteria, and it had a cover on here that's gone off. And so you see all the spores being released here. These get easily a foot tall. By the seashore, we have another species that's Batteridioides. You see it breaking out of the ground here at Lanai. They have all these little pores coming out of them like this where they release their spores. So these are stalked puffballs that you find. These are found by the beach. They're always right on the shore of every island. I've seen them on every island. And I don't know if you guys ever go to Kauai High, you know, the beach at Kauai High, and they have the showers there. This thing comes up everywhere. I get so many messages of what are these strange white things coming up here? And this is what they eventually look like. And I can guarantee you, if we go down to Kauai High today, we would find a bunch of them. They're there all the time in these very dry areas. And this is actually a mushroom. If you break open the top here, there will be gills inside. It's a mushroom turning into a stalked puffball. It's growing in these arid places like Podaxis. It stinks. It smells terrible. Somebody just asked on the eBay, can we eat them? And you just want to say, are you kidding? Have you smelled them? They smell terrible. And somebody piped in from the memory, oh yeah, this is a lawyer's wig, Coprinus comatus. It is not. It looks like that. They call it the false one, which it is false. And it's a total misidentification. But that's Podaxis, if you happen to see that. Now, stinkhorns. And I'm telling you again, these are the fruiting bodies of fungi. They're not mushrooms. These happen to be stinkhorns. This is taken on Oahu. Look at that thing. And here's I published a paper on all the stinkhorns of Hawaii. We have about 12 different kinds like this. Very beautiful, and they all smell to high heaven to attract insects, but that's what they look like. And of course, I told you already, the bird's nest fungi. We have probably 20 species of these in Hawaii, but they just differ on tiny little characters and so on. Okay, now for the next 2 hours, we're going to talk about Earth stars, because this is my favorite, Earth stars. Have you guys ever seen an Earth star? I said to my students, no, we've never seen what's an Earth star. Well, they look kind of star-like. They're like puffballs, but the outer skin ruptures into a star type of shape like this. So these are pictures in my backyard, you know, of these in the forest behind our place. And they just take all these shapes and forms, but all basically an Earth star form. This is the ostial where the spores come out of here. And I've been in the forest when it started raining and the raindrops hit these and each one puffs, just puffs, puffs, puffs. I wish I had a video camera to take that of all the spores being dispersed out of here. They grow in the driest parts of Hawaii, up on Mauna Kea on a mountain, and they grow into wettest places like this. These are the ones at Kauai High. Kauai High is very, very dry. These are the arched, you know, Geastrum fornicatum. Fornicate, believe it or not, means arched. And, you know, it's called, fornication is called that because the prostitutes used to ply their trade under the arches in London. And that's why it's called Fornagenum. But this is the ones like that. And these are Corallinum. These little guys, they wrap around twigs and stuff. And they're all, I just did a monograph on Earth stars of Hawaii. And this one, the salt and pepper shaker Earth star. This is at over on the Kona side, very common there. So these are some that we named. These are Hawaiian Earth stars. This one we called reticulatum. You can see the raised fibrils here that give this reticulated thing. And when they open up, this is what they look like, the beautiful Earth star. And we found them like on Kauai, they're right around koa trees. I could go and look for a koa tree, and sure enough, they would be around there, somehow associated with these. And they're common around the Hilo area. And then I found this one over in the Hilo area, and I looked at these and I said, they look just like lychee. They're about the same size. They're not as red as lychee, but they sure look like them. So we named it Lycheiforme. And this is when it opens up and spreads the spores out. So now you know what Earth stars are. You got to go come looking for Earth stars with me. Other types of fruiting bodies that are not mushrooms or puffballs, or these are the bracket fungi. And we have lots of these. These are wood rotters usually. Here's a beautiful sulfur shelf or chicken of the woods. This is deliciously edible. It's one of my favorites. Put it in stir fry or in stir fry or in omelets in the morning. This is a really good one to eat. And then what else can I tell you about them? These are the helpful fungi. You see all of these that get rid of all the woody debris. Some of these are called white rot fungi. And so they have trees, you guys all know, are made out of cellulose and lignin. The white fungi, the white rot fungi have both lignases and cellulases, and say they will just eat up that whole fallen log and get rid of it. Other ones are brown rotters, and they only have cellulases. And so they leave the lignin behind when they rot the log. And that lignin makes up part of the soil. And that the lignin will last for easily 500 years and has a proper pH for plant growth and moisture holding capacity. So we have white rot fungi and brown rot. And you'll find that like on the Hamakua coast, most of these are brown rot. And so where did the soil come from on the Hamakua coast? A lot of it comes from these fungi by breaking down the cellulose logs and so on. And you've probably seen this one. This is one of the most common ones. People use this to make a dye for wool and stuff like that. It makes a very orangish yellow dye, Pycnoporus. But it's doing its job of getting rid of that stump or getting rid of that log. Otherwise, we'd be buried in this cellulosic material. We do have boletes in Hawaii. A lot of them are good edibles. They're found under pine trees mostly, like these two top ones. This is Salmonicola and this is Brevipes. They're both found under pines. And this maverick guy is a saprotrophic. It just comes up in wood chip piles and stuff. So we do have boletes here. Now I'm just about done, but I wanted you guys to know this. We do have endemic Hawaiian mushrooms. They're found nowhere else in the world, as far as we know yet. And we have people, that are working in Indonesia and the Philippines and all through the Caribbean, Central South America, and they've never seen anything like these. And so when we found them and kind of realized that these are endemic to the Hawaiian Islands, we decided to go to the Hawaiian Studies unit at the university, to the Hawaiians, and say, here's some of your mushrooms. What should they be named? And they take it serious, they get a group together. And so you see up here is Noi Lokilani. Lokilani is the pink color of Maui. Since it's pink, it had to be named Lokilani. And when it grows in a wet rainforest, they put the prefix Noe, N-O-E on it. So this is Hygrocebi Noi Lokilani. Pakelo means slippery like a fish. And these are, you can't hold them in your hand. They will go right down your wrist, down to your elbow and drop off. They're extremely viscid like this. Lama Lama, whoa, I didn't want to do that. Lama Lama means glowing like the sun. You see this? This is taken in Molokai out there, and boy, they just shine. They look like egg yolks or something that's shining like the sun, Lama Lama. And we named several of these species after Madame Pele. So these are endemic Hawaiian mushrooms. Where do you find them? Above 4,000 feet, where you get into total native endemic forests. I've never found them below that in any kind of alien forest at all. As far as we know, there is no old name for mushrooms in Hawaiian. I've asked Kapuna, all types of folks, older folks, what's the name for mushrooms? And they said, they don't know. These mushrooms apparently didn't, even though they're very pretty colored and were surely seen in the forest by the people, they're not edible. When we study these mushrooms, we put a piece on our tongue and we chew it a little bit, and it's patui patui. They taste terrible. They are just awful. They're not hallucinogenic. None of the Hawaiian mushrooms are hallucinogenic, so not like in Mexico or places like that where they use them to see their ancestors or perceive the future or whatever. So they weren't very noticeable to the Hawaiians, probably. They're not edible, they're not poisonous, and they're not hallucinogenic here. But they sure are pretty. And when my colleague and I went to the mainland and showed these at the national meeting, we just knocked them out of their chairs when they saw the beautiful Hawaiian endemics. And then here's another Hawaiian endemic that's very interesting. In Volcanoes National Park and here on the Big Island, they grow on hapu, on tree ferns, or on fallen tree ferns like they are here. They have this raised area around the stipe of gills that makes them very recognizable. The one thing about them, when I first saw these in the forest, I check every 3 weeks, I would go to the same sites to see what was out. And I go, oh, there they are again. Those are their mushrooms. We didn't know what they were. There they are again. And then I realized those are the same mushrooms I saw 3 weeks ago. So I put little tags by the keikis, when they first came out, and they would last for 6 weeks without anybody eating them. That is snails or insects or other vermin that are around there. And so these probably have some important characteristics. So here I grew the mushrooms, I grew them in a petri dish and challenged it with fungi from its habitat. And you see, it just avoids it. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. You see, here's a challenge fungus against the Rhodocolibia laulaha. And you can see how it avoids it like this. So it'd be a good project for somebody for a master's degree to see if they're anti-nematode, anti-insect, properties in this fungus. And it's yours because it's from Hawaii. Have you guys ever seen a bioluminescent mushroom in Hawaii? No, neither have I. You guys probably sleep at night, right? You're not walking around in the forest looking for them. This was taken by my colleague that I work with, Dennis Desjardins, and he took it in Brazil. And he says, you can walk around in the pure dark at night with these in your hand, and you don't need a flashlight. They are so brilliant. And yes, we do. Look at this now on Kauai. Come up in these beautiful clusters like this, Phylloboletus, and there it is at night. And I've had several people call me and said they've come to work early in the morning. They've seen these bioluminescent things in the forest. So we got to get out there at night in the forest and see how many more of these there are. So we wrote a field guide. When we thought we had seen most of them, a lot of the mushrooms, you're never going to get to see them all. We published this field guide and it sold out quite quickly. And most of the issues are sold in California. There are actually very few people at that time that were interested in mushrooms from Hawaii. And then another company bought it over and they reproduced it with this cover, and unfortunately did a terrible job of reproducing the photos in there. But it's still available on Amazon. And now there's just, I was telling Russell, there's just this all people interested in foraging for mushrooms. It's just incredible in Hawaii now. I don't know who all these people are, but there sure is an uptick in studying mushrooms of Hawaii. So I just wanted to show you the guys that I worked with that all came here to Hawaii. Once they found out there was a mycologist here studying things, they all wanted to come to work in Hawaii. This is Dennis Desjardins from San Francisco State University, and you can see he's king of the mushrooms. Here he is describing a new species from elephant dung, you know, and so we worked together. I met him at a meeting, and I had put up a big poster with pictures of Hawaiian mushrooms, and his eyes got as big as pizzas. And we wrote a grant to NSF in 1 week, and we got funded for 7 years to climb from mountaintops to seashore to study mushrooms of Hawaii. And that started the adventure. And I would watch the conditions. I say, you got to get over here now. I think they're out. And we would start on Kauai, and we go to Molokai, Lanai, Oahu, and Maui, and we'd end up on the Big Island. And we'd go for about 2 weeks between semester breaks because we were both teaching at the same time. And then this guy heard about it, Bob Gilbertson, who is deceased now. He is probably the world's expert on polypores or wood rotting fungi. He's written 2 books on polypores of Europe, which is a fairly large place, and 2 on North America, which is another large place. And so he's a world expert and a teacher. And he took me, when he first came here for a meeting in Hilo, he took me in the ravine behind my house, and he said, sit down on this log, I want to tell you something. I have never seen so many wood rotting fungi in my life anywhere in the world as in Hilo. So he made 7 trips to Hilo, categorizing all these mushrooms in Hawaii. And this is Jack Rogers, who unfortunately passed away last month. And he is an expert on Xylariaceous ascomycetes fungus, and here's fungus. And here's his wife, Belle, and they made many trips here too. I worked with Elsa Valinga. She's a curator of mushrooms at Berkeley, and I've known her for years, and this is her husband, John, and we went all through the islands looking for Lepiota, which is her Kuleana. Fred Spiegels from the University of Arkansas, and he's worked on slime molds with me here, and one of his graduate students who's now a professor at Mississippi State. And this was one of my graduate students. What a guy. This is Matthew Curl. He's now a professor at State University of Florida. And he had to find this mushroom to finish his PhD at University of Chicago. And this is the only specimen we found. Can you see the disappointment in his face? And his words were, I'm never going to get my PhD. I remember him saying that. And Helen and I went out a few months later and just found bushel baskets full of them. So anyway, that's the luck. And this is another one of my graduate students who worked with me, Chris Peterson, who is now a professor at the University of Puerto Rico. And she did the agaricus of Hawaii. This is her husband there. Yeah. So I have spies, they're called former students, on all the islands. So this Erica Jenkins, I was on Maui, and they would call me, get over here now, the mushrooms are out. And you got to have spies like that helping you out. Here's one of my former students who is a ranger you see at Honaunau, City of Refuge. Look at the mushrooms growing. You know how dry it is over there? It's nothing but sand. And there they are, mushrooms. And this actually turned out to be an undescribed species that's growing at the base of coconut trees there. Yeah. And this is my other compatriot. Now that I'm retired and she's retired, she goes with me to keep me from getting lost. And here we are. My favorite hunting place is Mackenzie Park. And you can see the mushrooms are very common at Mackenzie Park. So that's the end of that. Now, wait a minute. Russell told me I could go on for 2 hours. So you guys aren't done yet. I got to show you some new stuff. This is it. Do you guys know what morels are?
Yeah, we just had some questions in the chat about morels.
Okay, here's the whole story. These are morels. There are blonde morels. There are black morels. These black morels are the ones that come up after forest fires in the West Coast, California. So, you know, the place is burning down and all the morel hunters are jumping up and down because next spring or the next couple of springs, there's going to be just tons of morel mushrooms coming up. There's many different types. There's probably about 30 or 40 species of morels that are now recognized, most of them from China, which is the epicenter. And you can see here's a Lucky Days collection. Yeah, you saute them, you make all kinds of dishes out of, they're just delicious type of things. Oh, here's the bad news. This guy researcher in China has discovered how to grow morels. Look at this. Look at this. He studied it, it was 12 or 16 years. He looked at the various species that are in China, tried all the parameters and stuff, and look at this. He figured out how to do it. And so, look at this. We might destroy the market for mushrooms like this. Look at the boxes, all the collections. These are you agriculturalists. You know, a lot of people have been trying to do this, and he's been very successful in doing that. So that's one story. Yes, we do have morels in Hawaii. Yeah, they're on, most of them we've collected on Maui and on the Big Island. Usually you just find one. But I just wrote an article on Hawaiian morels. So if you want to read about that, look in Fungi Magazine. And you see it's morels in the bird's nest. A friend of ours studies petrels. Petrels, you know, these birds, and they make burrows to lay their eggs. And they laid their eggs on the top of Haleakala. This is at 10,000 feet up there. And if you looked down into the burrow, there were morels growing in there. They grow on Hapu here in Volcanoes National Park. You have morels growing right out of Hapu. I've seen them grow out of cinder in Volcanoes National Park. So we do have them around, but who's got the time, you know, to see if you could culture these and so on, because we might be getting imports from China. Here's the second exciting thing, truffles. You know, truffles, you used to ask, what's the most expensive food in the world? And it was truffles. And when we were in Rome last time, there were shops everywhere selling truffles. They're starting to grow them, and see, like this, they're still expensive. These are white truffles. And so when I was in Germany a few months ago, before the pandemic, during the mushroom season, oh my goodness, I was in heaven. Look at all the mushrooms these people are collecting, including black morels. Well, these are from Italy, shipped in from Italy. And so here's how much they cost. You see, these are these little, you know, centimeter or more. That's 50 euros for that one right there. That's 25 euros, 33 euros for one of those. You just grate a little bit of it onto your food generally. And now the news is there's these guys in the Carolinas have planted these pine plantations, and they've put spores of truffles in there. And sure enough, they're growing truffles. We've got to grow a plantation first, but you're going to have truffles. And you guys know that they use dogs to smell them out. This is biology, folks. These truffles give off the same scent as the female sex pheromones of dogs. That's why the dog goes crazy digging for those truffles out there. So the dog right there is digging them up. And here you see they're harvesting them now. They slice them up. This is what they look like inside. You know, and when I first had some, I went, oh, patooey, they taste like dirt. They taste like dirt to me. But here's the black ones. We went to Rome, and I had black morels on, you know, pasta. It was the most wonderful dish I have ever had in my life. I just would go back to that very same restaurant. It depends on the sauce and stuff. And look at what they do. They do chickens like this and slip the truffles under the skin like this. And then the taste of the truffles goes totally into the meat of this. And here it's custards with a black truffle in it. There's so many different recipes for the black truffles. So perhaps they're going to be more common on our menus now, and we'll enjoy these. But it's still was fun to go look for them. So that's it. Now I'm ready for questions. It's all magical. You got to get out at night and find those bioluminescent ones. Russell, do you have any questions? I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I have a friend on Kauai who's found plenty of the bioluminescence, and he's got some in his yard and everything. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna tell him to send me some.
Yeah, they appear to be, they're always found in alien forests. So I think it's an introduced fungus. It is well known from other parts of the Pacific. It's not unique to Hawaii.
We do have some questions. Well, where can I find morels was one of them, and that one was answered. And some other people answered for you a little bit and told them to look in the contiguous US for morels, and you kind of touched on that as well. We also have an interesting one here. How do you usually identify what's edible and what's not edible mushrooms? Are there characteristics that you can generalize, or is it a bad idea to even try?
Yeah, that's a really loaded question. We have students for that, and we feed them to the students, and if 50% of they get sick, we say it's poisonous.
Okay,
No,
perfect.
we don't really do that, but we.
Where's the
threaten
sign up for that?
that.
I'm assuming you need new volunteers pretty consistently.
Yeah, periodically we need this. If I could have you for an hour, I could tell you what to look for. Certainly the amanitas, you want to look for the vulva, white gills, lady type skirt. These are the things you just look for. People still don't agree with it. I was in California and the Sierras, and here are these mushrooms, these amanitas, and all the Americans say, oh, those are deadly poisonous, don't do that. And there was another group of Italians right next to it say, no, that's delicious, we eat that all the time. So even amongst experts, mycophagists, there's still disagreement. But if I had a short time, I could show you like the Lepiodas are always, most of them are kind of toxic. You're not going to die from that, but from that chlorophyllum, the big green spored one, you would certainly end up in the emergency ward if you tried to eat one. They have very strong gastrointestinal toxins in them. So no, it's complicated, just because they look alike doesn't mean one's edible and one's not, because it even can be they're toxic at one season of the year, like hallucinogenic mushrooms. The same species can have a lot of hallucinogen in it, maybe in the fall and not in the spring.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe if people are interested and you're interested, we can do another talk that goes a little bit more in depth, but I'll talk to you later about that because I won't make you make a commitment in front of this many people. Just a lot of thank yous are going through the chat, Don, just so you know, people really appreciate you. What's the safest colors for mushrooms to eat? Is there a safe color to try? I think that kind of was touched on here, basically.
No, I wouldn't believe any of it. But we do have things like, I don't know if you saw that Rotalis, Agaricus rotalis. If you squeeze the base of the stem, it turns bright yellow. And usually we say, don't eat any yellow staining mushrooms like that. And there were words about, don't eat any blue staining boletes. But a lot of people say, oh, that's baloney. We eat them all the time. So the color, yeah, I wouldn't put too much on that. But before we do go, Russell, I would say anybody that has a mushroom they want identified, they can email me or have questions. And just my email is my last name, Hemis @hawaii.edu.
Oh, let's put that in the chat, Don, real quick.
Okay.
Could you repeat that for me?
It's my last name, Hemis, HEMMES @hawaii.edu.
Okay, that just went into the chat.
All right. Once we get through this terrible pandemic, I will take people out in the field on, I would be certainly be doing that. Right now, we've ended a dry summer, and in July, August, the first big rains come, and that's a signal for the mushrooms to come out. So now there's a lot of mushrooms out everywhere. And this would be the time I would take a foray out, to look and identify mushrooms. But with the pandemic, we just can't do that.
Awesome. That I'll be looking forward to that for sure. Oh, we've got Are you looking for any students, Don, or do you know of any other mycology professors that are accepting students? And I'm assuming this question is for Hawaii specific.
Uh, the guy that, the professor who replaced me, Brian Perry, that's one. Brian Perry replaced me. And then his wife got a job in California, so he moved to California. He's at Cal State East Bay, Cal State East Bay. So there's one, Brian Perry, but he's working on Hawaiian fungi, and he's working with, now I'm losing, the two mycologists at Manoa. It's a husband-wife team, and they're working together on fungi that live inside of leaves of plants.
Wow.
So all you landscapers, every single blade of grass and tree and leaf, inside of them are fungi living in there. And we're not sure, nobody's quite sure why they are or why the plant allows them to be in there. Because they're saprotrophs, so obviously they're taking some of the carbon budget of the tree. So these are just big areas of study. And Brian and the people from Manoa are studying, have a huge grant to study that in Hawaiian endemic trees, trying to figure out what they're doing there. These fungi make very strange organic molecules, molecules that you don't see anywhere in metabolism, that just are not found in nature. And so that is very much of interest to pharmacists, who are looking for antibiotics, anti-cancer drugs, and stuff like that. So that's what they're working on. They have a big grant, and they're running around the islands. And if you'd work for those folks, you learn all the molecular techniques, how you identify fungi that don't fruit, that don't make mushrooms or anything like that. How do you know who's who? And they use molecular techniques to do that. So those are the people. They didn't replace me or Brian here at Hilo, so there's really no mycologist there right now.
Yeah, and all the mycologists I work with are mainly focused on the diseases.
Exactly, yeah. There's certainly mycologists too. Brian Bush, I saw he was on there. He's a good guy.
We miss you, Brian. Okay, next question. Are there any non-native invasive mushrooms that have a negative impact on native ecosystems, or are most of the ones that we're discussing here and that weren't discussed, are they just innocuous?
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. Like in New Zealand when we were there, the Amanita muscaria is just invading through the pine plantations there and stuff, but probably doesn't have any harmful effect. I just wrote a paper, look at Fungi Magazine, on 4 new fleshy fungi, large fleshy fungi that have moved into the Hawaiian Islands and have gone across the landscape. And one is the bioluminescent one that's on Kauai. We haven't seen it move anywhere yet. The macrocybe or macrocybe, that great big one in clusters, started on Kauai and now is spread across all the islands, including the big island there. So there are new introductions of big fleshy fungi into Hawaii, but I haven't seen any impact on the native ecosystem. The only, I was showing you these puffballs. They're found in the native forest, but only on pig trails and in pig wallows. So obviously the pigs bring in some fungi that way, but
and of course there's all types of fungal species that are bad for native ecosystems. It's just they're not necessarily producing the mushrooms that we think of. The first one that comes to mind is Rapidohea death.
Right.
Don, it's Lynx, how's it going? There was that paper on Swillis pushing like higher productivity with pine forests and their ability to kind of invade places that would be a bit too arid for them, and like the slopes of Haleakala, et cetera.
Yeah. We have we have Swillis salmonicolor, we have revipes, we have a bunch of Swillis, but I've seen them mainly contained in introduce pine forests. Yeah, in there.
Just to cover some things really quick, I'm getting questions about licked credits. We are getting licked credits. You just wait until I send the post survey out for the webinar. It's going to request that you fill out information on there. I'm also re-adding to the chat the voluntary demographic survey, but this is not the licked CEU survey or the survey for the webinar in particular. It's just one that we collect information for demographic information. Okay. Dr. Kobayashi wanted to know, are there mushroom kits, I guess, for mushroom identification or for maybe even mushroom cultivation that are available for anywhere from higher education down to possibly even K through 12 education?
You know, there's been rumors of starting up, you know, you would just like have a watch on your wrist, and you could take a piece of the mushroom in there and stick it in. It would sequence its DNA and tell you what species it is. They're doing that for vascular plants too. I don't know where that's at yet, but it's coming on the scene there.
That's pretty cool.
But as far as growing mushrooms, well, the Bible is Paul Stamets. Paul Stamets's books on cultivating mushrooms goes step by step of how to grow mushrooms and how to cultivate them. And it goes through all the different cultivatable species and stuff. So my recommendation, if you're going to try to grow mushrooms, you should always start with oyster mushrooms, with pleurotus. If you can't grow them, you can't grow anything. They're the weeds of the mushroom cult, and they'll grow on cardboard and grow on wood chips or anything, and almost any substrate like that. And then get Paul Stamets's book on cultivating mushrooms. That would, I use his method of 4 parts wood chips and 1 part bran. And we've tried 15 different alien trees, you know, for wood chips. And the mushrooms grow just as well on any of the 15 that we tried, about exactly the same. And 1 part bran, it didn't matter if it's rice bran or wheat bran or rye bran, whatever you can get at the health food store. And Paul tells you how to put that together and how to raise mushrooms. But I would certainly start with not shiitake or something like that. Those are toughies. I would start with oyster mushrooms.
Cool.
Yeah, email, I'll tell you how we do it.
Is it safe to inhale spores, Don?
No, no. You got to be careful, like in the greenhouses, you know, where the hot houses where they grow mushrooms like that. You want to wear a mask and stuff, and you shouldn't sniff in the spores if you have some immunodeficiency or something like that. These spores can start growing in your lungs. Yeah, I've seen cases like that where that has happened. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't want to hear this. You want to be a medical mycologist. I went to one medical mycology meeting. They give you all barf bags when you go in, right? And they showed about this people who live around sloughs. You know, in the Midwest, they call them sloughs. They're kind of like swampy areas. And these people had, you know, organ transplants, and their immune system was down and stuff. And these fungi got in their brains. They sniffed them in and they grew, and these people were getting terrible headaches.
Wow.
You know, and they would die. Their skulls would split, and psyllium would grow out. Can you believe that? That's when I left the conference and decided not to be a medical mycologist.
Jeez.
They can be nasty, nasty things. You certainly would not want to sniff in spores from.
But in general, say you're working with mushrooms and they're dropping spores. Are you wearing a mask, or is it pretty safe to just be doing it?
It's pretty safe, unless you're I'd say in an enclosed space where you're working with lots of mushrooms constantly, you know, over long periods of time.
Yeah,
I would sure take protection from that. Can we ask Lynx something?
Yeah,
Lynx,
of course.
where are you, Lynx? Are you on the Big Island?
Hey, Don.
Hi.
Sorry. in the middle of eating and just kind of cherry picking questions and stuff. I'm actually back on Oahu for a little while. So I've been trying to play on Facebook a little bit, but would love to get out and look for some fungi with you at some point. But yeah, back on the islands for a spell, working with seabirds because they pay a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay.
Seabirds pay better.
Yeah.
They're looking into
It's
that.
great. I didn't hear about this stuff with Jeff and the morels and in the Oahu's nest. So that's exciting. I'll keep looking out for that while I'm looking for the birds.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had I found a number. I should have spoken with you, but I found a Najina growing on Oahu carcasses like 3 different times on Haleakala.
What was it?
A Najina.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
Really?
little, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for giving this talk. I was informed about it late, so I just popped in to see what's going on.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a
I
lot of
saw-
latecomers.
Yeah.
I saw you and mycologists of Hawaii piping in once in a while.
Kind of get more. It's
So
great.
yeah,
that-
we had a question about where to find mycologists of Hawaii. So I added that Facebook group link onto the chat, folks. So if you're interested in joining that Facebook group, it's in the chat.
And the folks Don was speaking was the Henson Lab that are doing the endophytic.
Yeah. I got blank on that. Yeah.
Yeah. no worries.
Cool. That's really
Thanks again.
awesome.
Yeah.
So it looks like the questions have dried up. So I think we can start to wrap it up. Again, the survey for filling out licked credits and for just general asking you how the webinar went is going to be sent out after this webinar. I'll send it out tomorrow. If you haven't filled out the voluntary demographic survey, please do, unless you don't want to. That's why it's voluntary. And I just want to thank you, Don, for another great talk. You know, it's always really inspiring to hear you talk about mushrooms. And I think we could make a whole series out of you doing it, but I won't pressure you into that. And so from everybody, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
Yeah.
Hi, Garrett. Okay.
All right, folks, just be on the lookout as long as you're on our mailing list for our next Lich webinars, which date to be determined. Thank you.
Next
Thank
will be
you.
about psychiatry.